Welcome to another episode of Mechanisms and Mentorship with your host, Rafael Testai. Today we have another very special guest. Let me give him an introduction first. Many people come to the SOLIDWORKS blog to learn the technical aspects of SOLIDWORKS, but we may overlook the importance of soft skills, and in that department, the actual management of all the technical individuals that use SOLIDWORKS, and how to get them to all pull in the same direction. So today's episode is going to be focused on CAD engineering management. And for that, I brought a 50-year savvy veteran, Michael Hadley from teampipeline.us. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Amazing. So you all know me. I like to dive right in. What's a common obstacle that CAD design engineers face, and how do you help them get unstuck?
I was afraid you were going to do that question first. I think the biggest obstacle most CAD designers have is that they try to get to the end too quickly, right? They just, like you in this show, you dove right in. That's great. In a CAD design, in an engineering design, in an engineering assembly, in a device, a fixture, whatever it is you're making, to start right away with the CAD, I think, is a mistake. I think that's like in the middle somewhere. And so I think a lot of guys, what happens, and I've seen it a lot, they'll start a design and they get into the middle of it and realize there were a whole lot of things that now they have to undo or redo or do in a different way. So for me, I'm a big fan of drawing on paper. I'm a big fan of using PowerPoint as a drawing tool. You know, squares, lines, circles, start there. Keep it simple. Another thing that I like to do a lot as you know from resilient modeling strategies, is I want all of my dimensions and drivers at the top of my tree. So that means that I have to have all of my sketches at the top of the tree. I don't want any dimensions further downstream in the actual solid portion of the CAD file. I want them all at the beginning, and that requires quite a bit of forethought. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll start with a master model and kind of get myself into that corner, and then I know how to go back and start properly. That was a long-winded answer.
Fantastic. So when Michael's referring about, I think it's called a design intent, right?
Absolutely.
At the top of the feature tree. And if you want to learn more about RMS, what's the website that people can find more about that?
LearnRMS.com.
There we go.
Yeah.
So link in the comments below. Yeah. Question number 2 is, what's the best thing about being a CAD engineering manager, and what's the worst?
Wow. Well, the worst thing is I don't get to do as much CAD as I used to. And I love driving around in 3D space. That's always been fun. The best thing, I think, is, and it's not just CAD management, it's any management position, any leadership position. The thing that I'm happiest about is, but actually I've been doing this for 50 years, and so in one form or another, and so I hate to just see all of that, all those lessons learned, all the mistakes that I've made just thrown away. So the opportunity to mentor, to guide other people is it's a blessing. It's like I can't think of a better thing that I could possibly do at this stage of my life and this stage of my career.
Here we have a chance in front of a big audience on the internet, and this video can be rewatched in the future. What are some of those lessons learned that you may want to share with some CAD engineers and designers out there?
The biggest lesson I've learned throughout doing all this I started in 3D solid software in '89 with one of the earliest versions of Pro Engineer that ever, that came out. And it was groundbreaking. It was amazing, because up to that point, we'd been using 2D software like CAD Key or AutoCAD, and to be able to actually see something happen in 3D was amazing. But people just kind of ran with it without thinking, well, wait a minute, what is the best way to do this? How do I optimize this so that not only I can be more efficient at my job, but somebody else can take my model, look at it, and instantly understand how and why I created it the way I did. And that's a process that takes a little while to learn. And so I would say that develop that skill, develop the ability to make what I call editable models that anybody could take a look at and quickly, by looking at the feature tree, go, oh yeah, I see what he's doing and why he's doing it. That's why I label everything in the feature tree. You know, you can rename anything in the feature tree.
Slow double click.
Everything.
Yep.
And so to me, that's huge. In terms of leadership, I think the most important thing, I've worked for a lot of really bad leaders through the years and a number of really good ones. The bad ones tend to make their mistakes my mistakes, you know, and it can even, you know, one of my famous sayings, right, is the meaning of your communication is the result you get. And so, in one hand, that's me taking responsibility for you understanding what I'm trying to communicate. But on the other hand, it also still gives me control, because if you misunderstood it, I'm responsible. So I get to restate, make sure that my communication is clear. And so I think that's one of the biggest lessons that I see a lot of leaders miss, is they think that if they just say something, you should get it. I don't believe that. I think if I say something, I need to make certain that my communication is clear.
What's that saying one more time?
The meaning of your communication is the result you get. So when I ask somebody to do something and they do something that wasn't what I thought I asked, rather than blame them, I look at, well, how did I phrase it so that this is the result I got, and how can I rephrase it to get the result I want?
This is fantastic. Not just applicable in the workplace. This is like also marriage advice. Like, wonderful.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't work so well with pets.
So you must have seen a lot of management gone wrong to come to that conclusion.
I have.
Years. Yeah.
I have. I think one of the jobs of a manager, particularly in a corporate structure, is to, you know, there's always pressure coming from the top, right? More, faster, harder, better. A good leader's job is to stop that pressure and not pass it on down. To absorb that pressure here and then facilitate an environment where the people working, the reports, you know, the people working with you have more room to be innovative and, you know, and creative. Those are interesting words in the corporate world, because we want that, but we don't want it on our dime, right? We want somebody else to pay for that.
In concept, in theory, that sounds good. Not pass it on the pressure to the team. Mm-hmm. But what if you have a hard deadline that you have to meet? How do you not pass the pressure? A little pressure is good, right?
A little pressure is good, I suppose. Another one of my my management philosophies is lead from the front. And a lot of people say that, and they say, oh yeah, I lead from the front, you know, and I would never ask somebody to do what I wouldn't do. But I don't think that's the answer. I don't think that's the correct way to say it. It isn't asking somebody what I wouldn't do. It's asking somebody, it's to be already doing what I'm asking other people to do. So for example, when there's a big deadline, I'm the engineering manager. I get in there and I make drawings to help out. You know,
that sends a message.
Right. I'm in the trenches with everybody else, and I think that's the appropriate position, appropriate place for a manager to be. Is you know, I don't know. You know, growing up, I always saw these managers as people that just sat in an office and smoked fat cigars and told other people what to do. I think that's a bad picture. That's a picture that doesn't really work.
How do people respond to that if they just get told what to do from the picture you just described?
Well, my entire life, I've always been told that I have a very poor respect for authority. and the reason is because, you know, if I see somebody, you know, doing it that way, my first thought is, well, obviously they don't know how to do it. They're you know, and I think that I don't know, you're too young to know this, but there was a book a long time ago called The Peter Principle, where this gentleman noticed that one of the things that happens in the corporate world is that people get promoted past their level of competence. We get good at something, and people go, "Oh, you're so good at that. You should do this." And then they do that, and if they're still competent, you keep getting promoted until you get to a point where you're not good at it anymore. And then that's where you get stuck. And so we have a lot of people in the corporate world that have been promoted to the point where they're not good at it anymore, and yet that's where they stay, because they can't be demoted, right? So now they're stuck with doing a job that they're not good at and that they aren't capable of doing.
So what's the solution for that?
The solution for that is companies like Pipeline.
This is where we are right now.
Where we are right now. Aaron understands this, and so what we do is we make sure another, I think, really important job of a leader, and Aaron demonstrates this well.
He's talking about Aaron Munker, the founder of teampipeline.us, the place where we are. His LinkedIn will be in the comments below. So the question was, how does a company prevent managers or people getting in a position where they're no longer competent? How does one avoid that? And here's the answer.
How do we avoid the Peter principle? He spells it out in the book, but the best way to do it, and the way that we do it here at Pipeline, is we make sure that everybody has, first off, we make it okay to fail, okay to make mistakes. That requires a certain level of honesty. I have to be willing to admit that, hey, I don't know how to do this. Then what we do is we get somebody together with them that does know how to do that, and work through it, and train everybody how to do what you do. This is another one of my basic leadership principles. As soon as I get promoted into a new position, I've always immediately looked for who's going to replace me, and start working with that person to be my replacement when I move on somewhere else. And by doing that, that person becomes skilled. They don't just suddenly show up in my position not having ever heard about it, or what I do, or how I do it, or that kind of thing. I don't know if that really answers the question well. It's a complicated question, but it has to do with open, honest communication. That's really the foundation of it.
Creating a safe work environment that people can admit when things don't go right, and they can share their lessons learned.
Right.
Perfect. Let's see. So you mentioned that one of your favorite things to do is to actually get on CAD and design, and as a manager, unfortunately, you don't get to do that as often. So how did you fall into management?
I really don't know the answer to that. I was on my own, working in my own company. I had a number of customers, and Aaron, the owner of Pipeline, called me up one day and asked if I knew somebody that he could hire to be an engineering manager for his new and upcoming company called Pipeline. Back then there were 3 employees, but he figured it was time to look ahead. He's got good vision, to look ahead and see into the future. I'm going to need an engineering manager. And I said, well, I could do that. and here I am.
Well, that worked out. That's how you fall into management. That makes sense.
That's how you fall into management, right? Yep.
So I know that you're a very humble person, so this may be hard to answer. But if you were to analyze yourself objectively, why do you think Michael Hadley is a great manager?
Well, I take some exception there. I don't know that I am a great manager. And I don't know that I'm humble. So
that's humble itself.
Well, I don't know. I think that one of the things, the principles I've been talking about are foundational to being what I think is a good manager is simply a good leader. A good leader is simply just a good person. A person that has empathy, that listens, that is careful in their communication, that takes responsibility for their communication, and is willing to not take credit for everything good that happens. I used to work with a manager, and he said, his philosophy was to take credit for anything good that happened within 5 miles of him. And I thought, no, what I'd rather do is if you do something great, or even if you do something sort of great, I want to make sure that you know it and everybody else knows that you did that. And it wasn't me, it was you. And it's a whole thing of building up the people around you, making them understand their value. It isn't that making them feel like they have value, because they do have value. Everybody has value. Everybody has something to share, something to contribute. The question is, I think a lot of people stop contributing and sort of just hang out in a place because they aren't encouraged and they aren't nurtured and they aren't rewarded for what they do and what they do well.
Okay. Now, the next question is, what do you call... I need help with this phrase first. Like, what's something that everyone in an industry believes? Is that like general consensus? Is that what you would call it?
A myth?
A myth, maybe, right? Well, what's maybe a myth that everyone in management believes from all these books everywhere, but from your experience, you think is questionable? Like, you're skeptical about this thing that everyone believes in.
Wow. Well, one thing that everybody believes in, or everybody tells everybody to believe in, is that hard work creates success. And I don't think that's true. I think you can't have success without hard work, but I don't think hard work alone makes success. And so leading from a position of, well, I just need for you to work hard, no, it comes back to, I think that people at work that work should be happy. And to me, there's three elements of happiness, right? That's sort of outside of work, but they're important to work. And those three elements of happiness are: you need somebody to love, you need something to look forward to, and you need something worth doing. So what I wanted to make sure that everybody that's working with me has something worth doing, that we're not just making widgets. We're doing something that is potentially going to benefit society. I mean, this sounds really airy-fairy and 1960s hippie, but I want to do something that makes a difference in the world. I want to do something that contributes. I want to do something that that I think is worthwhile, that is worth doing. And we have so many problems in the world.
Michael's a deep person. How do we define worthwhile? One of the components is to make others people's lives better. I think you hinted at that, but what else makes it worthwhile? Right?
Well, if it solves one of the big problems facing us, if it solves climate change, and there's like that, okay, that alone, there's a million places to go with that. We're running out of water. There's a million places to go with that.
Why don't you share with us for the next 5 minutes or so some of the projects you worked on that made people's lives better?
Well, one of the projects I have to show, it actually didn't make anybody's life better, but it could have. Was this, an 85 kilowatt solar dish. It's 75 feet in diameter. And when we started this project, I learned so much on this project. When we started this project, oil was $180 a barrel. By the time we got this guy running and actually making electricity, oil was $90 a barrel. And within a few months, it was down to $35 a barrel. And the CEO of this company had a great statement, and that is that nobody buys Gucci electrons.
So now Michael's going to show a project that he actually has a patent on. So take it away, Michael.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. I think that's a key element of success. That's a whole nother little conversation that we could have about how to position oneself and to be in the right place at the right time, because there's a little skill to that, but it also comes down to a certain amount of luck. A physician came to us at this company, and they wanted, what this is it's an airway bite block. You've all seen airways that every EMT kit on the planet has. That's the tube in the back is the airway. And then the bite block is something that's commonly used in endoscopic surgery that's done through the esophagus. There's a whole bunch of surgeries that are done that way. And the bite block prevents the patient, even though they're asleep, it prevents the patient from biting on the instruments as they slide in and out. And one of the challenges that that this physician had is that he was primarily doing gastrointestinal surgery, stomach stapling, removing of ulcers, a variety of different things, and a very large portion of his clientele was obese. One of the challenges with being obese is that when you are asleep it's very easy for your tongue to fall back against the palate of the roof of your mouth and block your airway. If you are anesthetized, that's a really bad thing to have happen because you stop breathing. So what he wanted was a combination bite block so that he could use his instruments gastrointestinally and would also protect the patient from that event happening. He had been told by 3 different engineering firms that such a thing was impossible to make. It was impossible to mold, and I said, well, that's the challenge I want. I had an engineering manager a few years ago that used to say, bad news doesn't age well. And that's sort of a negative take on what one of the core values we have at Pipeline is, which is no surprises. So my journey with a customer is a weekly communication channel where I spend an hour, 2 hours preparing an email that gives them an update every week. So we never get to a point where suddenly we're late. We're never suddenly late. We've been late a long time, right? And they've known it the whole time. We never get to a point where we're suddenly over budget.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for being on the show.